In Chapter 2, we will be talking about designing observational studies and experiments. So, in statistics, what you do is you analyze data. Well, where do you get the data from? Well, you have to do some sort of study to collect that data. And so that's what we're going to explore in Chapter 2. First, some terminology that we'll need to use. There we go. First one is individuals. So when you hear the individuals, we are just referring to the people or the objects that we want to learn about. We'll be looking at one here in just a second, and our individuals are going to be these volcanoes in the study that we're going to do. Um, so just whatever it is you're going to be looking at. Now, the variables in statistics, they aren't like they are in math, where we think of it as being a number. Um, in stats, it can be a characteristic of the individual that you are just measuring or observing. It could be a color, for example, or it could be a number like temperature. But that's what you're going to be looking at as you look at the individuals. And then the observations are the actual values, the data that you get when you measure those variables. Oops, let's get rid of that. There we go. So here's our example. Like I said, we were going to look at volcanoes. Oops, jumped ahead just a little bit. And so you can see we have a table of data here. We've got the volcano names right there. Then we have their country that they're from, the year, if it caused a tsunami or not, and then the number of deaths. So what we're going to do is we're going to identify what the individuals are, what the variables are, and then what our data actually is, or what our observations are. So in this case, what we're looking at is volcanoes. So those are going to be our individuals. And so if we're asked what the individuals are, notice how we just give a listing. Okay, these are the individuals. And what are we going to study about them, or what are we going to look at? Well, we're going to look at the country they're from, the year, whether it caused a tsunami or not, and the number of deaths that it produced. And so that makes these other values here our variables, the things that we are going to try to observe. Again, note how I've labeled them up here. The variables country, year, cause tsunami, so that's a yes or no. Country, obviously a word, number of deaths. Now we're back to a number element. And then finally, we've got our individuals, we got the variables, and then we have the observations of those variables. So for country, what did we observe? Well, we observed these 5 different countries. For the year that these volcanoes killed people, there's our observations, yes, and all these no's. And then lastly, our number of deaths. So that's how we can organize data, and that's what we would talk about in this study. Um, in terms of trying to answer different questions. I'm not sure why my dog is so upset, so I'm going to. So here's our first question that we're going to answer now. Which eruption caused the greatest number of deaths? So we're just going to look in our deaths column here, and we can see that it looks like the Pelee volcano caused the most deaths. So Pelee did. How many more people died in 1902 Pelee eruption than did in the 1982 Chichon eruption? So we've got 2 different death rates. We've got our deaths in Pelee, which is 28,000. We have our deaths in Chichon, which is 1,879. And if we want to know more, we want to find the difference between these two. So we just have to take that 28,000, subtract off this 1,879. You could just grab a calculator if you wanted to. Let's see here, it's 1, 9 minus 7 is 2, 9 minus 8 is 1, 7 minus 1 is 6. So it looks like 26,121 more deaths. in Pelee. In statistics, to successfully achieve our final goal, which is to draw conclusions about a study of some object or a population, we want to follow these 4 steps to be successful. So the first thing is when you set up and decide to do something, you better define the question very, very clearly and precisely. The more precise the question is, the easier it is to get a good outcome. Whether the outcome is positive or negative, it doesn't matter, but you'll be able to answer the question. Then once you've decided on that question, you create your plan. The plan's going to be, how are we going to collect our samples? What observations do we have to make? All in an effort to try to answer that question from number 1. So once you've decided the variables, the individuals that you're going to study, the variables you're going to look at, then you're ready to collect the data or make those observations. And then lastly, this is where the meat of it is. You take and you have to analyze that data and draw conclusions from it. And the last 2 definitions before we get to some examples are the terms population and sample. Population is going to refer to the entire group of individuals that we want to try to answer a question about. And so down here, maybe we were trying to answer a question about all American adults. Now, we couldn't go survey all those adults and take, that'd be huge. There's too many. Okay, so what we do is we just ask questions of a small population of that group, a representation or a small group that represents well the mixture of what America adults are made up of. That little subgroup of this that we actually survey is called the sample or the sample population. Okay, so the population is the whole thing. The sample population is the group that you actually do study. So let's look at an example here. In a poll, and yes, these questions tend to be long because they give you a ton of information to begin with. So in a poll of 1,000 randomly selected American adults, so that's who they picked, 48% that they strongly disapprove of Congress. The study then made some inferences about all the American adults. So in this case, let's define the variable. The variable is what you're trying to measure, okay? And in this case, they're trying to measure how these respondents felt about Congress and how it's doing its job. Okay, what is our sample? Remember, the sample is that subgroup. That's the 100 people, not 100, but the 1,000 people, 1,000 up here, that they selected. And what's the population? Well, they're trying to give a statement about all American adults. So that's the entire group they're trying to answer some question about. So here's one without the answers to think about, and then I'll answer them. Do you think the drink 18? In a survey, a telephone survey, 74% of 1,013 randomly selected American adults said no. The study then made inferences about all American adults. So let's define the variable. The variable in this case is should the drinking age be lowered to 18? And I should probably even be more even specific about this. If American adults feel the drinking age should be lowered to 18. So we want to be as specific as we can with the sentence we write in that case. What is the sample? So what is the group that we're asking this question of? and that's the 1013 American adults surveyed by phone. I apologize for my dog. And finally, the population, that's what we're trying to draw the conclusion about. We're taking the sample of people from all American adults. And I think I might have, nope, that's it. That should be enough to get you through the first